but I didn't do anything for several years. Quite by accident, I picked up a book called Crossing with the Virgin by Kathy Ferguson and Norma Price, who's in the audience. And because I liked the cover of the book, I really didn't know what the book was about. But when I read the book, I was struck with a group called the Samaritans, who go out into the desert and also go down to Mexico, and firsthand do what they can to save lives in the desert. In fact, the mission is very simple of the Samaritans: prevent deaths in the desert. By that time, which was about in 2010, I really wanted simplicity because the debates in Congress were going nowhere. I was so confused about which direction, who to believe. I wasn't believing the media much anymore. But that book opened my eyes. So I Googled Samaritans, and I just showed up cold at a meeting one Monday morning. There were 125 people with white hair at this meeting. I will never forget it. It was at 8 a.m. They were all on time. That was amazing. And they took notes. The meeting was 1 hour. It was very organized. I found out that groups went out every day into the desert, and another group went once a week to Nogales, Sonora, to a place called the Comedor, which is dining place, to offer aid and medical care to injured migrants. So I signed up for all of it. I went on some desert searches, started going to Nogales, to the Comedor, and I made a commitment to myself to do this every week for a year, just to learn about the immigration situation. And my long-range goal was to try and change the immigration policy, which seemed to be inhumane, insane, and crazy. It's been 4 years, and I'm still going every week to the Comedor because I'm so drawn to the work, drawn to the people. In fact, Tuesday was Veterans Day, and on the radio or on NPR, of course, they were interviewing a lot of veterans, and people were saying what they admire, of course, about veterans are the heroism, the courage, and the sacrifice. And I thought to myself, that is exactly how I see the migrant people that I work with. They are my heroes. They are courageous, and they give the ultimate sacrifice. Many of them give their lives trying to get back to their families. So I wanted to learn, what drives thousands of Latinos from their homes into our treacherous deserts, where so many in this country despise them, and where they are not welcome. I started volunteering at the Comedor with the Samaritans. And the people that come to the Comedor are migrants who have been in our detention centers for many months. Often they're migrants who have been lost in the desert for many, many days. And then, of course, there are a lot of people that are heading north from Central America and from South Mexico. The people I see, many have been injured. They have blistered feet like I've never seen in my life, like I never saw as a practicing nurse. People with severed limbs from riding the trains north. But mostly people with a dignity that is difficult to describe. It is a quiet dignity that touches me deeply and sustains me. Many people say, well, how can you do this each week? Because it's so despairing and it just seems so hopeless. But this is not the feeling I get when I go to the Comedor. In fact, often I feel a lot of joy. The nuns really like salsa music at the Commodore. It's a shelter that's run by Jesuits and the nuns. And so they crank up the salsa music, and often a migrant will stand up, grab one of the Samaritans, start dancing around the shelter. And it's just incongruous to know that this guy might have been in the desert for 5 days, and now he's hooping and hollering and dancing. And one of the priests plays a guitar, singing very bawdy bar room songs, I might add. And it can be a place of joy, a place of hope, certainly a place of faith. I guess that's the other reason I go to the Commodore, and that, my own path with faith has been rocky. I don't attend church. But the spirit that I feel at the Commodore is palpable. I mean, the place almost levitates at times with the focused energy and faith that the migrants feel toward their God, certainly toward the Virgen de Guadalupe. And I feel a real void in our country when it comes to this sort of spirituality, but it is so present and so focused at the Commodore that I've decided, I guess this is my church. I just want to read a little bit from my book, which is A Land of Hard Edges. I called it A Land of Hard Edges because I've been in Oregon for 30 years, and everything in Oregon is soft, I decided. The rocks have moss on them. The ground, you sink in an inch or two when you're walking in the forest. The air is soft. But in Arizona, just about everything is hard. The ground is hard. The rocks are hard. You sit on a rock, you probably have a bruise, particularly if you try and clamber over them. And the border is hard. It's a hard edge. The people live hard lives. This is an extreme state in so many ways. And I like that. I like the extreme hot. I like the extreme cold. And I like to feel the ground underneath my feet. In Oregon, I was never quite sure, when I was walking along, where the bottom was. I guess I'm like Chuck. I like the dirt. I do like the dirt. So I'm going to read just a page or two from my book. It's called Mi Amor, or Love, My Love. And it's about a little girl. She's being held here actually by Harry, who's one of the Samaritans. And this is a little baby that was at the Commodore one day. And she, the Samaritans, we never forgot her. There are times when the actions of my migrant friends leave me speechless and upset for days, especially when there are children sitting at the breakfast tables. An encounter with baby Amor and her grandmother is one I remember well. Baby Amor is sitting at the breakfast table staring off into space as her grandmother tries to feed her the mashed pinto beans. The child never smiles, not once. All the cooing and jiggling and silly faces do not entice this baby to give us the tiniest grin. Amor is 18 months old, and she and her grandmother have just been released from a detention center. The child is from Sinaloa, heading to Utah with Grandma. They will try to cross again tonight, even though the Border Patrol picked them up a few days ago in the desert. Dressed in a pink sleeper we have found in the donated bags of clothing, Amor looks pretty spacey, sad and expressionless. Her skin is sallow and there's a rash on her little baby cheeks. Harry, a Samaritan colleague, bounces her around the room, hoping the movement will bring a giggle to this small child. There is nothing. No tears, no smiles, just a look that seems to pass right through me. Grandma knows the risks, yet is determined to try again. She lives in Utah, speaks both Spanish and English, and must bring little Amor to the United States for reasons she cannot discuss. You don't really want to know, she tells me. She is shaking her head and has the look of disappointment in her family and her circumstances. Grandma is on the run. I ask if she has a plan after she crosses into the desert. She tells me her son will meet her. Everything will be okay, she says. I have my cell phone. Grandma sounds determined and confident. I, on the other hand, am aghast. Climbing over a 20-foot wall with a small child is beyond my comprehension. How did you happen to settle in Utah? This feisty grandma lights up and tells me she loves Utah. I love the people, and I am almost a Mormon. Amor quietly watches me talk. Her eyes look like they are 1,000 years old. She's thin and appears to be 6 months old, not 18 months. She does not try to walk or crawl and needs to be supported when she sits on the bench. I tell them both that there is another meal at 4 in the afternoon. Be sure to feed Amor and take extra nourishment. The nights are cold now. We have blankets. I show her the socks, the jackets. The Samaritans implore Grandma to spend some time in Nogales and wait in this place for a while. Perhaps her son can visit her here. Grandma shrugs off the advice and begins looking for warmer jackets, shoes that fit, and some diapers. If there are miracles afoot, tonight is the night that Amor and Grandma will need one. I think about Amor for weeks. She and Grandma leave the Commodore, and no one ever hears from them again. I have no idea what happened to this little baby and Grandma, and I guess that's one of the most difficult jobs about volunteering at the Commodore is you don't know what happens to the people. Occasionally, they'll give us a call, particularly if we share our cell phone numbers, and say, hey, I'm in New York. And I go, how did you get there? They're pretty cagey or coy about telling me quite how, but a lot of people make it to places thousands of miles from Nogales, Sonora. So this work has changed me. I meet people who have nothing. They're stripped of their money, their medications, their identification, their families. Yet they are generous, they have a dignity, and they're willing to die to reach their families. They have a spiritual reservoir, I think, that this country lacks. And it nurtures me and sustains me to be around them. I've become radicalized about this issue. I've become a crazy hippie old lady about it, actually. I mean, I love our country and the freedoms we enjoy, but sometimes our laws, just because it's a law doesn't make it right. And our federal laws have it all wrong about immigration. They're morally wrong. They do not respect human beings. And, we've gone through a lot of history where the laws have been wrong. I grew up in the 60s. I remember the segregation of schools. I remember George Wallace. I remember the hoses on the little black kids trying to get into the schools in Alabama. That was a crazy, wrong law. There's slavery. There's also the laws about marrying whomever you choose. Thankfully, maybe we're waking up about that law. But sometimes I feel you have to break a law in order to make things right. And I cannot respect an immigration policy that criminalizes people who want to work and want to return to their family. So there's a higher law that needs to be followed, and for me it's very simple. If someone is hungry, you feed them. If someone is injured, you help them. And if you're breaking the law, maybe more of us need to do that. So if I were in charge, if I were the president, and actually, we'll see what happens next week. I got a little glimmer of hope here with our friend Mr. Obama. If I were in charge and could write policy, I would do 4 things. I would issue guest worker visas. that seems like a no-brainer. So many people that I meet don't want to live here full time. They want to come here, they want to work, they want to go back to their homes. And they want to do this without someone pointing a gun at them or dying in our desert. I would rethink NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association. I think when NAFTA came in, which was 1994, this caused a mass exodus, and the politics, I'm not going to go into the politics, but that's when the numbers of migrants began to increase. It also created a level of poverty that didn't exist before. People on their farms in the southern Mexico, they were able to sustain themselves. NAFTA's also caused the destruction of some very fertile land. I talk to a lot of farmers every week at the Commodore, and many of them say, first of all, they've lost their farms to NAFTA, and they've told me, I'm not sure I'd want to go back now because you've sprayed the land with herbicides, and it's not the same. Plus the GMO, the Monsanto has come in with genetically modified plants and have totally changed the 200 varieties of corn that we used to grow there. So it's not the same for me, and I'm not sure I'd want to go back. I would decriminalize drugs. The whole war on drugs has been a joke. The only people I think that feel that the war on drugs has been successful are the drug dealers. Instead, I would pour money into treatment centers. If drugs were decriminalized, it would probably be a business, much like alcohol, much like cigarettes. Yes, we would have addiction problems, but hey, we've got them now. So maybe we'd figure out how better to treat people. I see the whole drug thing as more of a public health issue than a criminal issue. And I would, of course, fast track the dreamers and the people the 11 million that have been here for many years. I would fast track them toward a place in our society, or toward citizenship, but certainly a place where they're not threatened with deportation. So that's my story. And my book is about a year at the Commodore. It's a story of many people. It's a story of the aid workers. It's a story of my own transformation, really, from being a more of a passive observer to a social activist. I'd like to close with another quote from Chuck, my brother. Chuck and I used to listen to a lot of Bob Dylan back in the day, and there was a song about knocking on heaven's door. And this is a quote, I think it was just from an interview he did somewhere, but he said, "There is a knock at the door, and it is not heaven's door. And I open it, and there is a face, a hungry face, a frightened face, and I say, come in." Thank you. So I'd like to open it for questions about